Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending to this year's annual 1099 training put on by SFMS as it pertains to the state 1099 production through R-Stars. There are some things. We've got some 2025 announced changes that we're going to go over. They're more than the usual number of 0. 1099 eligibility criteria. We're going to go over the box and form review. The DAFR reports that come out and are still coming out through through January. Agency and SFMS responsibilities, changes to reportable and reported information, undeliverable and copy requests, miscellaneous topics such as vendor payments, prior year corrections, the E099 report, 1099 processing timelines, and supplemental information. Then we're going to do wrap up and final questions. As Justin said, I am requesting on this training to submit the questions during the question slides because like Doug, I will squirrel. So moving forward, let's talk about 1099s and how they are produced through R-Star. Oh, the changes first. Let's do the changes first. This is the last year that the fire system will be in accepting 1099s. So if your agency is reporting other 1099s through the fire system, if you have not signed up for the IRIS system, please do so as quickly as you can to get your new TCC because fire system will accept the returns for the 2025 tax year submitted in 2026, but it is shutting down. So IRIS will become the only reporting source starting in the tax year of 2026, reporting calendar year 2027. Also, reported changes in DOR and the iWire system per an email they sent out on 10/15. If you did not receive it and you want the whole email, let me know. I can send it to you. But they announced that the IRS Pub 1220 it announced that Oregon was on part of the combined federal state filing program. No, they're not. Please do not report them as such. Oregon is still accepting those filing returns. What the combined state filing is you file once with the IRS and the IRS will send it to the state, but Oregon doesn't do that. You file with the federals, you file with the state separately through the iWire system. The other announced change is starting with the 2026 tax year. DOR will require submissions of 1099 forms through their revenue online through a revenue online account. You have to have your own account, in other words, to file your 1099s. Now, if you're not filing anything other than what we're talking about today, which is through our R-Stars, which DAS files for you, you don't need to worry about this because we do already have our own online account and we're prepared for this. But if you are filing, if you have subsystems that you have to file 1099s out of, you have to get your own iWire account. You can't just go in and file like we have been able to in the previous years. So, hope all of that makes sense. Okay, the programming that determines when a 1099 will be produced through R-Stars is as follows. Vendor must be 1099 eligible to receive a 1099, and this is predetermined on the 52 screen. Must be paid with a reportable comp object, which is predetermined on the D10 screen. Not the D11, the D10. And meet IRS box minimums, which are $600 for the boxes that we report on. the state of Oregon. Eligible vendors are sole proprietor or individuals that are getting paid under their Social Security numbers, partnerships, LLCs, LLPs that are not not S corps, lawyers, attorneys at law, PCs, and in this case, corporations are not an excuse to not receive a 1099. Medical service providers, MD, PhDs, RNs, PT, all of the medical designations. Again, corporations is not an excuse, and they are not excluded from receiving 1099s. And trust accounts. So if we were to go to the 52 screen, vendor eligibility to receive a 1099 is pre-established with the 1099 indicator code. You can see that in the example on your screen where it says 1099 indicator Y. You'll also find this on the 51 screen 000 because 51000 is essentially the 52 screen. So if you're used to using the 51 screen, it's the 000, which is the parent screen. When we're looking at eligible comp objects and when you're looking to see if a comp object is eligible or not, in this case, it's for NEC, you're looking for the form being N and the box being 1, because only box 1 is what the state of Oregon reports on. They do have I think 2 other boxes that people are able to use. State of Oregon only uses box 1, which is non-employee compensation for the NEC. And then for the miscellaneous comp object, this is a little bit more varied. It's also the 10. You're looking at the form. It's going to be M for miscellaneous. And then it's anything other than N. So there are some zeros. There's which is gross attorney proceeds. 1, which is rents. 3, which is other income. 6, which is medical services. So that would be in the 1099 indicator would be other than N, form M. And then non-eligible comp objects basically look like this. They have a 1099 indicator of N. So, and no form. The form is blank. So when they're talking about reaching eligibility status, one of the reports that will help you determine this is will show you it's going to be either the DAFR 7940 or the DAFR NE40. And it'll show you not only, it'll show you the box number that could be potentially reported and or what your agency will be responsible or reported for. Now, as you may or may not be aware, the minimum box is actually determined by all of the agencies that use R-stars, all of them that report on the reportable comp object. You're only going to see on the reports what your agency has paid. So just be aware of that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Non-eligibility vendor types are corporations and S corps. Exceptions, again, like I stated previously, are the law firms or attorneys and medical corporations. A non-for-profit, just in their name, is not reportable, but SFMS vendor desk does require proof of this status to mark them as non-eligible. If they don't receive the proof of that, then they will be marked with a yes on the 1099 indicator on the 52 screen. Government entities, cities, counties, state, federal agencies, sub-agencies of cities and counties and states are all non-reportable just by IRS code. Employee reimbursements, if it is determined that they are reportable, should be reported on a W-2 and not on a 1099 unless they have a separate business and are doing separate things for the state. So if they are an artist and have other clients, potentially if they provide art for the state, if they win a contract and they provide art for the state, they could receive a 1099. But at that point, they need to be entered as a separate vendor with their social security or their business number. Just be aware of that. But employee reimbursements like travel, lodging, meals for an overnight stay, all of those would need to go, if they're determined that they are reportable, need to go on their W-2s because those are employee expenses. So a non-eligible vendor is going to be 1099 indicator N. So that's what you're looking for. Okay, recap of conditions. All tests must be met for the vendor to receive a 1099 miscellaneous or NEC form. Vendor must be a reportable entity and coded appropriately on the 52 screen. Must be paid using a 1099 eligible comp object, D10. And the payments must meet the box minimum of 600. If any one of these conditions is not met, a vendor will not receive a form and the income will not be reported to the IRS. And this is all done behind the scenes with our programming staff. It's built into the system to do this automatically. So, any questions on who is going to be potentially eligible to receive a 1099 and how that is determined? Okay. What was that question, Amber?
There is a question. John asked that medical services and healthcare professional corps, PC or incorporated providers should be 1099 only for providing medical services and healthcare services.
Correct.
How do you suggest we report or correct 1099 reportable transactions paid to these companies for non-reportable transactions, such as consulting services? Some vendors we use are not exclusive to our agency and SFMS, though some of our contractors are exclusive to us.
Correct. And I'm going to talk about making corrections later so please be patient. I don't want to bring that ahead. But as far as not being exclusive to any vendor in the state can be used by the state, any agency, if they are in our stars, because we don't make them exclusive. So if the vendor's in our stars, has a valid number, and is open and good to go, I'm assuming DHS and or corrections can use the same vendor. And if it's medical services they're providing, it's all box 6. Now, if you have $300 and they have $300, it doesn't look like it on your report, but together aggregate 600, they will receive a 1099. Does that kind of answer the question without saying how to recode, because we're going to talk about that later? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Don't think you can do frowny faces? Not really. If I don't answer your question later, John, please send me an email because I do want to assist you in this. Anybody else who's eligible? This is just the basic who upfront without any work or anything is eligible to receive a 1099. Okay. Moving on. Okay, 1099 miscellaneous form is This is what the basic form looks like, hasn't been filled out. The boxes I'm going to talk about today are the boxes that the state of Oregon uses and reports on, which is rents, which is box 1, box 3, other income, box 6, medical and healthcare payments, and box 10, gross attorney fees, proceeds paid to an attorney. So if this is probably going to be a review for a great number of you, but please stick with me on this. It is important to kind of understand. Box 1, rental income, unless the rent is paid to a real estate agent, is reportable through box 1. Machinery and equipment rental, or if you rent a canopy, the machine rental is part of the contract and includes the use of the machine and the operator. Just so you know, the rent for, if it's separated on the invoice, the rent for the physical machinery or whatever property you're renting is box 1, income on the miscellaneous. However, if services to put that up into operation or to operate that machinery is separated on that invoice, that belongs on box 1, non-employee compensation, on the NEC form. Same box, different form. So 1, rent on miscellaneous, box 1, NEC, non-employee compensation. Pasture rental, so if you're renting land for grazing purposes or to allow deer to graze on it, that's box 1. Operating leases, I don't believe we have any coin-operated amusements, but we might with the state fair. Rental assistance payments made directly to owners of the housing project. So if you're, I know there are agencies that pay rental assistance for their clients to the housing for in their name. That is box 1. If they're paying it and supplementing it and giving it to their clients, that is not reportable. But the ones going to the owners of the property, that is reportable. Hope that's clear. Box 3, other income, is kind of a catch-all box. So it could be prizes and awards when nothing was performed, no services were performed, and when you to receive the prize or award, and it's above de minimis, which is about $25. Deceased employee wages go in this box. Punitive damages without bodily injury go into this box. Claimant settlements without bodily injuries that are paid to lawyers and the person that brought the suit. If there are no bodily injuries, it goes to the claimant in the total. So this is a fun one. We report the gross amount of payment in this box for that purpose. Generally speaking, it's just risk that DAS Risks does this. Vendor must work with their attorney for the attorney fees to be related to their claims. We don't know what their attorney fees are. We don't try to assess what the attorney fees are, so they get the whole amount. Payments to dependent care providers. And this is providing services for a relative only. So if grandma and grandpa are taking care of their grandkids, those are relatives. It goes into box 3. If it's being paid by the state. Box 3, lodging, is kind of fun. Payments made to the lodging facilities itself, Holiday Inn, bed and breakfast, any place that you can pay to stay, that is reported to the business regardless of the person who benefits from the lodging. If the lodging is paid for an outside vendor and to the vendor themselves, that is reportable in box 1 of the NEC form. because they are not an employee. That's part of their compensation and their contract, so it goes on the NEC form. So this should be considered as part of the compensation for services. If reimbursing a state employee, the payment is not reportable to the employee on a 1099 miscellaneous, but it may be determined that it needs to be included on a W-2. And generally speaking, this happens only if an overnight stay is not required at the time. So just so you know. Box 6, medical and healthcare payments. There is no, like I said, there are no corporate exemptions for this box. So if it is a corporation and they're providing services, this is the box that it needs to go in. So it's physicians, other suppliers, or providers of medical healthcare services. And the suppliers is we've got a codicil on that one a little bit further down. Physical therapists, massage therapists, psychotherapists, mental health care counselors, you get it. If they work in the medical field, they're subject to this box. Pre-employment physicals or drug screenings, if your agency requires this, or if you use expert medical testimony, it goes in box 6, not on box 1, non-employee compensation, but box 6, if it's medical in nature. Counseling for medical health, drug and alcohol treatment, diagnostics or therapeutic services, then healthcare services that include charges for injection, drugs, dentures, or similar items. This one's a hard one because it's in these cases, the entire payment is subject to information reporting if the healthcare services are provided in conjunction with the supplies. Payments made by healthcare insurances under health accident sickness insurance programs is also reportable. So if they're providing services, they're eligible for box 6. The exceptions for box 6 are just a few. Tax exempt hospitals, so not-for-profit hospitals, are exempt. So corporations, not exempt, but if they are a not-profit and we have the paperwork, then those are exempt. Extended care facilities, so if you've long-term care facilities or a rehab facilities, if they're there for a prolonged period of time. Facilities owned and operated by the government, so think Salem, the state hospital. We wouldn't send it there. Number 1, because they're a government institution, they're already don't pass that test. And then payments for prescription drugs without services included. So if you go into the pharmacy, pick up drugs, and no services were included in that, then that's not reportable. And then box 10, gross proceeds paid. So be very careful because you've got lawyers not only on the NEC form, you've got the box that is really, really pretty. It says gross proceeds for lawyers, box 10. This is for attorneys that perform services for someone other than the state of Oregon. So those claimants I was talking about a little bit earlier for box 3, this is the lawyer side of it. So payments to an attorney and a claimant name can be, or a named client trust fund. The payments need to be reported twice. The attorney is in box 10. The claimant is box 3. They're representing someone other than the state of Oregon. If they are representing the state of Oregon, that is box 1 NEC. So, let's talk about the NEC form. Realistically, we only talk about the non-employee compensation. And this is, frankly speaking, this form is 99% of what we produce for 1099s. So here we're talking about payment to someone that is not an employee of the state of Oregon. It's for services in the normal trade or business of the state of Oregon, for the state of Oregon, payments to an individual, partnership, or state, and in some cases, corporation. And I will give you that specific of why a corporation in this situation, and payments of at least $600 during the course of the calendar year. Okay, we're talking about payments for services which are non-medical, because obviously that belongs in box 6 of the miscellaneous. This also can include parts and materials used to provide those services. Professional service fees include attorney fees where the state or state agency is the client. Independent contractor or volunteer payments can be subject to a 1099. Amounts paid to volunteers in excess of 14 cents per mile are subject to reporting, but you still need to get up to that $600, and it takes a lot. So if you're paying your volunteers or your board members who are volunteers, the going rate for mileage to go to meetings or conferences or whatever you're paying for, 14 cents is the going rate per mile. But if you're giving them the full amount, then you're going to have to do that calculation to see where does it becomes that amount above becomes the $600. Payments made to vendors or volunteers for meals, if they are not included in an overnight stay, are reportable. Payments to care providers that are caring for people other than their relatives, because remember, if your grandma and grandpa are taking care of their grandkids, and the state is paying for that care, that's box 3 of the miscellaneous. But if they're taking care of someone who is not their relatives and it's not non-medical, then that is non-employee compensation. And then we do want you to be aware that reportable fixed asset charges can be subject to the 1099. So occasionally, when you're setting up a fixed asset, cost to prepare the site to receive a piece of equipment and cost to repair or a capital asset if that repair is if you add materially to the value, life, or functionality of that asset. I know you can code that to fixed asset to, like all good accountants, we would do that. But they might be also eligible for a 1099. So just be aware of that if they receive that $600 or more. Capital outlay. If the costs are charged to services and supply accounts and then capitalized, please use a comp object that is 1099 reportable, and we suggest in the range of 5105 to 5905 to look at those comp objects. The accounts payable personnel responsible for 1099 NEC reporting should collaborate with the fixed asset accountants to verify that all reportable sums are captured for IRS reporting. We don't want to be caught out in an audit in the future if an IRS audit comes through and not have these costs captured and reported correctly. Okay, any questions on identifying appropriate boxes and forms?
There is one question. Julie has a question. She says, lodging for outside vendors. Sorry. Are we reporting under the facility on an NEC and the outside vendor on a separate NEC?
Julie, I may have to get back to you on that one. Probably if we're reporting, if we're paying, okay, if we're paying directly to I would say we're not reporting it to the vendor if we're paying it for the vendor, and directly to the facilities because we're already reporting it to the facilities. However, if you're reimbursing the vendor for that cost, if they paid for it, then you're reimbursing it, then you're flipping it right back to a 1099 for them. So I'd say yes and no. So it's who are you paying? It's always who are you paying? That makes sense?
If the lodging is paid for an outside vendor, the payment is reportable.
Yes, it is reportable.
Perfect.
To whom you paid.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlene.
Okay, moving on. Okay, let's talk about the DAFR 7940 report. This report is regards to 1099 miscellaneous, and this is what it looks like. It's going so we're talking about the reports now that help you determine and some of your corrections. And then this is the NEC form. They look surprisingly alike, but they have different comp objects associated with them. Vendors present, only 1099 eligible vendors will appear on the 7940 and the DAFR 40, DAFR NE 40 reports. And the vendors may be on both reports if they don't have a comp object that is associated with either miscellaneous or NEC. There's no way around that. Just going to be there both times. This report includes all D10 reportable activity and all D10 non-reportable activity. So you're going to see all payments and activities that affect a 1099 on these reports. So vendors previously identified as non-reportable are not included on these reports. So if you're expecting to see someone and they're not there, you might want to go back and look at the 52 screen to see why they've been coded as a non-reportable or if they've been incorrectly identified as non-reportable. Those we're really interested in, and it happens at least once a year. Okay, the activity up and down for the transactions are any warrant payments. Obviously, that's gonna be a positive on the 1099. If there have been any warrant cancellations or stop payments, that's going to decrease the amount being reported. Direct deposits are kind of not a full calendar year. It's kind of shifted slightly just because of when they are likely to receive the deposit. So for this next tax year, it's any payments made between 12/27/24 and 12/28/25. Transfers with the vendor numbers include BTs, and this can be a positive or a negative or a non-event if they offset one another. If backup withholding box 4, which we didn't talk about previously, is present, the system will generate if appropriate. It's a positive. We haven't had box 4 in a number of years. Number one, because our vendor staff are very diligent about doing TIN matching. So if it's not a match on the through the IRS TIN matching website, we won't activate, so you can't pay. And really, we haven't had backup withholding for a number of years, other than the last backup withholding was when we did get the shot out. campaign for COVID-19. So that was a number of years ago, but nothing currently. So that's why we really didn't talk about it earlier. Just so you know, plus or minus is just that. Increase the amount, decrease the amount on the 1099s reported. Okay, let's talk about where you can find the information on these reports, kind of go over what is available. So the vendor number is there. So you're going to have a list of the vendor number. You're going to have the IRS box that's been associated with that vendor number. The comp object and the agency object box are both available. So if your agency is one that uses your AP staff is far more acquainted with the agency object code, just realize that is there for your convenience. It doesn't mean that your agency, other agencies use agency objects in their work, but it's available for you. But it is being driven by the comp object, if that makes sense. So the vendor number IRS box is going to be showing whether it's a 1, a 3, 4, 6, or 10 is all reportable on 1099 miscellaneous. On the DAFR 7940, box 1 and 4 if reportable on the NEC on the NE40 report. N is not reportable. These are non-reportable comp objects. And all payments to the vendor will be listed, but only those payments that are identified with a box number will be eligible to be reported to the IRS. I know I'm harping on this, but it seems like I have to explain this all the time. So it's a recurring theme. The transaction amounts will be shown, CUR doc numbers, and suffix numbers, which is basically the payment or what documents increased or decreased the amounts. The ref doc is the original document used to make the payment. So you've got ZE documents are the liquidation documents, and ZE doc numbers contain payment dates. It's a fun little thing. So in this, I pulled the ZE 50423R. So that basically means that this was a payment made in 2025, April 23rd in the regular cycle. And then we also have BT documents. And BT documents are tricky. In this case, it goes up and goes down. So it's a negative. It's a no effect. It's a 0, essentially, on this one. But ref doc number and suffix. And then total payments for sub-objects. So it's gonna categorize by comp objects, and then total payments for the IRS box. So it displays what box is going to be potentially reported, and the amount, and then what was totally paid to a vendor. So we ask you to review this information on both reports. They are control reports. They are provided electronically. They are out there on certain given dates, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But RefDocs numbers and suffix are VP, VX, VI, BTs, and BIs. We're looking at total payments by comp object, by IRS box number, and by the vendor. Then we want you to pay special attention to the vendors that only have BT and BI entries for 1099 reporting. So if you come across a vendor that only has a BT and it's creating a 1099, we're asking you to take a little extra special care for that vendor and confirm that the original payment was in fact in the calendar year of 2025. So January 1st through December 31st of this year. Confirm that the original payment was, or confirm that the payment was not previously reported to the IRS. So if it's a 2024 and it wasn't reported in a payment in 2024, it may need to be, and it is now become reportable. Actions may need to be taken so it's not reported in 2025 because the income was not received in 2025 or sent out in 2025. It might be 2024. And then make the necessary correction to fix if needed. And we'll talk about making those corrections and how to do that in a moment. Anyway, we just want you to review the coding that doesn't appear appropriate for a vendor or activity for that vendor. The BT seem to be the bugaboo. Okay. The other things to consider when you're reviewing is the vendor name and does it appear appropriate? Is there, if it appears to be a non-reportable vendor, then with a name like Corp or Inc. included in the vendor, you would almost think, oh, well, that should be, as long as it's not medical or an attorney, almost seems like it shouldn't be reported. So you need to go to the 52 profile and do a little double check, just really quick. If the 1099 indicator is Y, is it appropriate? Well, there could be a reason why it's still Y. If the vendor has not returned a valid W-9, they are considered reportable, and you can see that, and they will be included on these reports as eligible. And on the 52 vendor profile screen, the vendor type will be coded with an 8 or a 9. An 8 is where we're waiting for a valid W-9 to come in so that we can properly code the vendor. And a 9 is where we've waited a certain amount of time for the W-9 to be received, and it has not come in. So if we haven't received it, then any payments made while it's in 8 status and you use a reportable comp object, they're going to receive a 1099. Just remember that over-reporting is never an issue, under-reporting is. So we, as State of Oregon, long time ago, it was determined that we would rather over-report in these instances. There's no harm, no foul in that, but there is an under-reporting. And the vendor profile cannot and will not be updated on a W-9 form without the W-9 form. We can't update it on the 52 without a valid W-9 form. So if its vendor appears to be coded correctly, except the 1099 is a Y, so we have received the W-9. They are other. It's the vendor type is other than 8 or 9, and we missed changing off the 1099 indicator. Send the vendor desk vendor change request form to the SFMS vendor desk so they can process and update the 1099 indicator to N. These vendors may be included on both reports, like I mentioned earlier, and will receive appropriate 1099 if all other conditions are met to receive a 1099 reportable. So we're talking reportable comp object, $600 or more. So much information, so much to look at, so much of what we're relying on you is to go over these reports. So do you have any questions about what you're to be looking at, and questions on the 7940 report, any 40 reports, and what we would like you to review?
Antonia asks, when will these reports be available?
Well, the last report produced was on November 14th, and uh, and they are out there electronically where you receive all your other electronic reports on what is it, the Columbia website for reports. If you are having problems accessing them, uh, every agency should have them electronically. I put them in that way myself a couple of years ago. Uh, so if you are having trouble accessing those reports, uh, please send an email to either myself or uh, an SFMS analyst, your SFMS analyst, and they can assist you in uh, showing you where these reports are. We're going to talk about agency responsibilities uh, regarding the 1099s because a lot of this and a lot of the success of the 1099 rests on your shoulders. Uh, Accuracy of all information reported on a 1099 MISC or NEC forms is the responsibility of the agency. This is assured through the review of the 7940 and the NE40 reports, mindful review of the BT transactions that we talked about earlier, looking at cancels and stop payment timing impacts, timely corrections made to any identified errors, and timely review and resolution of when questions arise from 1099 being received by the vendors and calling me. Vendor also reporting to the IRS all reportable vendors and reportable payments issued through the system and sub-agency systems. Determine the vendor eligibility to receive this information. So as we talked about a little bit earlier, determine if what's coded on the 52 is correct, if you notice a glaring error. Determine what payments are eligible and determine if they meet the minimum amount reported. And be aware of all reporting requirements and filing requirement needs, which is why you take this class and you rely on DAS to provide good information. So taking this class helps, even if it is a review and you've done it 15 times. So also, if you are an agency that has to issue other 1099s, if you have a subsystem and need to send out a 1099s from Miscellaneous or NEC uh, or other 1099s, even though the payments come through our stars, this could be a scholarship or qualifying tuition program payments, which is reported on a 1099-Q, or grant recipients, subrecipients, 1099-G form. So be aware of that. Those are reported through the agency, and even if they are paid through our stars, the only thing DAS will file is the 1099 NEC or MISCs if the payment was through our stars. Okay, and then agency responsibility for vendor information. Why is the vendor information why is the agency responsible for this information? And why are the questions directed to the agencies versus my answering them? If you put great notes on that description on line when you're putting a payment in or the document for the payment, I sometimes can answer questions, but I don't have some of the more complicated questions. I don't have the backup documentation. I don't have the relationship with those vendors. The agency does, and you also have the knowledge of what's going on as far as whether this is supplier services because you see those invoices and have access to them. So that's why the agency is responsible for providing accurate information or corrections through review of the reports. And just by someone calling me, I might say, yeah, you might have a really good point that this might be something that they need to review because I realize you guys are all very, very busy, especially at the end of the year. You're trying to get the biennium closed. You're trying to get everything done. Uh, but SFMS will not make any changes uh, or uh, or reporting changes without an agency being aware of it and having completed and requesting those changes through a 1099 change request form. And these will need to be signed by the agency authorized signer. And I have an agency 1099 contacts list, and just by the virtue of you being on that list for your agency, you are eligible to sign off on those changes because you've taken the classes, you understand what's going on, you understand what is being required of you to make any changes. And these are manual changes. That is subsequent to any after December has closed. Agency is also, because of this, is responsible for any fees that are assessed, penalties due to statements not being generated. Remember, over-reporting is not a problem. Under-reporting is. And timing of those reports are a big thing too. So these can be as high as $250 per statement. I told you, squirrel. Incorrect reporting can be as little as $30 a information return and as much as $100 per statement. So we need to provide correct payee statements without reasonable cause. Reporting is in the correct form, excuse me, form and box, and reporting correct amounts. Intentional disregard of any of this of payment statement requirements is 530 per statement and no maximum on that. So interest and all of that can accrue up to a god-awful fee. So please be aware that I am relying on you guys, and you guys have been amazing in the past. So I don't believe this has ever been nor ever will be an issue with the employees for the state of Oregon as far as the people that take responsibility for their agency's 1099 reporting. But just be aware that fees can be assessed and they can get ugly quickly. And the agency that is the offender is responsible for those fees. DAS does not pay that unless it's DAS. DAS proper. SFMS responsibilities are we get all the printing and mailing of the original and any corrected forms out through the mail and to the eligible vendors. All state and federal filings are for those forms. We meet all reporting deadlines for 1099 forms. So January 31st is the due date for reporting 1099 NEC, and March 31st of 2026 is the reporting deadline for the 1099 miscellaneous. Now we do the first printing of 1099 miscellaneous because we need to get them in the mail by January 31st, but they are not electronically reported to the IRS until March 31st. 1099 contacts for all submitted forms for the vendor. We are the contacts. My phone number is literally on every single 1099 issued by the state of Oregon out of R-Stars for the vendors to call. And they always start calling right around that first week of February, within days of those 1099s being issued. So we answer any questions that arise from the vendors if we can, and try to protect your time as the best to the best of our ability. But we occasionally do need to alert the agency if further review is being requested by the vendor. And we will always provide contact information for that vendor if you need to talk to them, or an email email address, cell phone numbers, and I will put the situation as best I can, as best I understand it, in the description so that you can kind of look and review your records. So any questions on the various responsibilities that separate DAS, SFMS, actually, my desk, and the agency?
We do have a question. Also, several people are just having problems with sound, and so I haven't had any problems. Your voice is soft, but it seems like it's cutting out for people. So I just want to throw that out there that we're really sorry that that's happening, and unfortunately, in the Teams audio setting, there's not much that we can do. But feel free to.
Amber, I can raise my voice if I need to be a little bit louder. I do have an umpire voice. Former
Thank
life.
you.
So if that helps, let me know if is this a better volume for people? Thumbs up, thumbs down. I wish we had a thumbs down. I don't think they.
I'm not sure. I asked someone specifically, and they had said that they maybe had just like completely lost the video cube, and so, but yes, sound is.
Positive thumbs here. Okay, so you can hear me. Okay, I will try to keep my umpire voice in action then.
Thanks, Carlene. Okay. They did have a question though. Are agencies able to review copies of 1099s filed for their consultants?
The only way you can review it is what's on the report. Review the 1099s for their consultants. It's everything is on that report. The comp objects used, the payments used, that's the way we're asking you to review it. If it isn't right on the report, it's certainly not going to be right when it's sent out. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Because if that doesn't answer your question, but it's that those agency reports are the all important. They are all important. That is the gospel according to our stars. Not the answer I wanted, but that does answer it. Yeah, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's to review those and like I said, if you're looking for a consultant that is not on the reports, not on the NE40 or found on the 7940, please go to the 52 and make sure we've got it coded correctly and how you would expect it to be. Okay? I am going to go ahead and move on.
Thanks, Carlene.
Okay, here's the changes. The question was asked earlier, how do I make changes? Okay, reports are provided to the agencies to be used for review. Like I said, the November 14th was the last one produced and is still online, still available for review for potential 1099 reporting. The next one will be December 31st. Prior to month end, and then the last one produced will be on the nightly batch cycle of January 16th, which is December 12 month close, and that is the one that we ask, we plead, we hope that you save both reports, NE and 7940. So that any corrections that potentially comes your way, you have a copy of that report and you can refer back to that report. So incorrect comp object is identified. So these are the fixes. You find an incorrect comp object was identified during the review of your reports prior to January 16th. So prior to December month end close date. Changes can be completed by the agency using T code 415-416 to process transfer to a correct comp object. You won't see the paper forms. Uh, to change it from either so you can send it over to the correct comp object or reportable comp object using a box. I know that Amber sent out a list of comp objects, more for miscellaneous than NEC, which only has one box, but if it's supposed to be reported in a certain box on the MISC, those changes can be done there. You want to include the vendor number on the reclassified transaction. So if it's not supposed to be reportable, you want to get it off that vendor, so that the vendor number needs to be on that transaction on the BT, both sides. If you want to put it either on or take it off, so that make sure that vendor number is on the BT. And use the effective date of 12/31/25 for corrections, because if you use a different date like January 5th, that's going to move it into 2026 for the correction. So you potentially could be moving something out of into both reporting years if you're by using a 2026 date. So please keep it to 12/31/25 for making those corrections. So changes identified prior to January 16, 2026. Make sure the doc effective date on all T code 415-416 transactions with a 20. Be aware that like I said, the 2026 correction date will elicit a 2026 tax response and will be included in next year's taxes and on those reports. Effective date must be no later than December 31st, 2025. And do not process these T code 415-416 transfers for a 2025 transaction that includes a vendor number after January 2026. So if you have to make an accounting change for a payment that was done in 2025 and you know for a fact they received a 1099, don't use that vendor number on the 415-416 change after January 16th, because that's going to put it into the next year. So it potentially could be reported both years. That's everybody's worst nightmare. It's like, I received it in 2025. Why am I receiving it in 2026? I love those phone calls. Okay, changes identified after January 16th are going to be all manual changes. So really, there's a short period of time that you can use this 415-416 to affect a 2025 tax year. After that, I'm going to have to impact their taxes. And then you're going to have to be careful of how you date your BT to correct it. If you do end up correcting it, you may not. Manual changes need to be requested after January 16th. So identify what form and box number these belong in to correctly report, and reference your reports, because although some of you probably have access to the reporting screens in R-Stars, which is the 43N and 43M, that would be aggregate. So we really want you only correcting amounts that pertain to your agency and your agency only. Complete a corrected 1099 change request form, miscellaneous or NEC. And then manual change request forms is used for the following. We change the reported amounts to the IRS. We add the 1099 information return if not produced through the IRS program, so they could be brand new if they weren't reported before. We can remove amounts. So if it's wrong and was too much reported, we can change that too. Moving payment amounts to different boxes if they were reported in incorrect boxes. This can sometimes happen with the attorney fees, because everybody loves box 10 on the miscellaneous, but really it belongs in NEC, box 1. And you want to email those directly to me. We don't have a separate email box where those would be received. So please send them to me. And those instructions are on the form. But let's talk about the 1099 change request forms. They are currently out online. This is what the form essentially looks like in its, no, it's really small for me, but it goes to me. Just put your agency name and your number, and that only needs to be the three-digit number. You don't need to put 84500 or 10000. Who requested it? Here again, authorized signer, phone number, an email where you can be reached if in case I have any questions or concerns. We want the vendor name, the tax year, vendor number, reason for change in the boxes. And then NEC change request is same information up top. I'm a curious little person. I want to know why you're making this change. And then there's only one box really that needs to be changed on this form. Okay. So changes identified. Basically what we're looking for is if a vendor has received a 1099 miscellaneous or NEC for payment that is not reportable. It was missed, mistakes happen. You guys didn't have a lot of them last year. I think I did 41 changes on miscellaneous and in the 20s for NECs last year. 60 changes, not bad considering we sent out more than 10,000 1099s last year. So honestly, you guys have this down, and I love you for it because you make my job easy. But we want to submit the appropriate 1099 change report. So know if you're sending a miscellaneous, know if it should be an NEC. Change the dollars from to a reduced amount 0 in this case, because it should not have been reported. So the amount of the change will be determined by the difference between the from and the to listed by your agency only. So in this case, the agency is saying, hey, we paid them per our report 300 plus thousand, but really it was nothing. But another agency might have paid them, and that actually should have been reported. So you're reporting for only your agency. What's on your report? And use the IRS box total. So change from, we had it here, we need to change it to this amount. If they should receive a 1099, excuse me, and they didn't, the comp objects were wrong, this should have been reported. If a vendor payment needs to be included, verify that the vendor is still reportable on the 52 screen, because that is something I do check. So if I get these and I look at it, I go to the 52 screen and say, hey, why didn't this produce? And I go to the 52 screen and notice that, oh no, they are a non-reportable vendor. It stops right there. I don't send out one just because you guys say to. I start with what we would look at normally in what produces a 1099. I look at the vendor. Is it a reportable vendor? If it's not a reportable vendor, then it stops right there. But I will let you know that, hey, this didn't produce because they're a non-reportable vendor, and we don't send out 1099s just because the vendor wants us to. They have to meet the criteria for us to. So I verify that the vendor is a reportable on the 52. If not, maybe I need to confirm the coding with the vendor desk. If there's an error in coding, then we need a request to update that profile. And it may require a 1099 or a W-9. If it is appropriate, please submit the relevant change, use the appropriate IRS box reporting, and change from 0 to the amount that needs to be reported. I know I'm asking you to do this, but I will come up behind you and do it as well, just to make sure. It doesn't hurt to have a double check on it. If a change is due to a vendor for an organizational change, so they've changed the type of business they are, the vendor will be required to submit documentation of their change and when that change occurred. So we need the proof that they have changed IRS from an incorporation or a non-for-profit status. Proof of the date of sale of the entity, because sometimes that occurs where they've sold it to someone else and the name is still the same. So you've been paying who you think you should be paying, and that actually there was a sale and they're no longer responsible for the new one. We need a valid W-9 for that, and we need to change that the date that it was effective. So if it is a prior year 1099 where they sold the business in 2024, we're not automatically going to adjust that. We paid who we paid. We reported, they're responsible. It may necessitate 2 change requests, because if you're paying on an old EIN or Social Security number and they've sold the business or vendor type, we may need to it may be a one and done where it's they've gone from a reportable entity type to a non-reportable entity type. So you just need to cancel the 1099 reportable. So you're going, the changes from a dollar amount to 0. It may be that they've changed their EIN and they're still reportable. But it's being reported on the wrong EIN number. So you're zeroing out one and adding dollars to another. If it's a mid-year change, then the amount being reported that first however many months or days or years is on one form. So you're reducing the gross amount on that and you're adding to the other guy. There's so many combinations, but the whole key is getting the right amount for the right vendor EIN number reported for the right year. Change in vendor number reporting after 116. Process requires 2 change request forms, like I kind of just indicated. One 1099 change request form with the incorrect vendor number, so you're changing it from dollars to 0. And one request from 0 to dollars, or it could be just change the amounts. These 2 forms should be sent together so we can do them at the same time. And just so you know, I'm not totally heartless, just mostly. So if an agency has a very large number of 1099 changes that they've identified and it's after January 16th, or you're saving them up because there's no other way to do it that you can see, if you have 10 or more changes, we have a spreadsheet for you. Just please contact me and let me know that you have 10 or more changes, and they need to be they will be submitted on a spreadsheet, and we have, if they're all miscellaneous changes, they go on one spreadsheet. If there are NEC changes, they go on another. Not the twain shall meet, because I keep my backup separated because the forms are separate. Please contact me before you just submit that, so that I can send you the approved spreadsheet for this many changes. Other than that, I want individual change forms, because I use it as backup. And if the IRS comes in and they say, hey, why was this? It looks like the payment amount is this. Well, this is why. I've got an authorized change. This is what happened, because you're going to explain why you're making the change, and we can back that up with this documentation. If you have further questions, please contact the agencies. For all vendor profile changes and updates to profiles, these need to be completed with a vendor change request and submitted to the vendor SFMS vendor desk. Just be aware that only staff that has been pre-approved or pre-authorized to make vendor changes may request these changes. So if you are not on that list, changes will be rejected and sent back to you. These forms will be rejected and sent back to you. So please, if you don't know if you're on the pre-authorized list to make changes, please contact the vendor desk to find out if you're on that list or not. If you are not authorized, the agency will need to ascertain who in your agency is, so that they can, if you need those changes made, you can go to the correct person within your agency that can request those changes be made. So just so you be aware, the vendor desk does have a list that they maintain, and they are very diligent and strict about that, who makes those change requests. So any questions? I kind of got half that.
We have a couple of questions. First of all, one's just a statement, and maybe you can just confirm that that is true. That they can't see the paper forms, but they can see the information on the 43M or N screens as well.
They can.
Cool.
They can.
Awesome.
If they are authorized to access the screen, and you can find out that through, I believe it's the 96B screen, if you have access to that, or just contact your SFMS analyst, or I can research that for you, so long as you send me your RACF.
Yeah.
And your user codes, because some user codes have been not authorized to view the 43 M or N screen, because there is very sensitive information on that screen, as you would expect.
Sure. Okay. So if they can't, then they need to reach out. So
right.
Okay.
And just realize that that is an aggregate. It doesn't just show your agency. It is anyone in the state of Oregon that has paid that vendor with a reportable comp object.
Oh, that's great to know. That's good. So then, perfect. And then can you please clarify when all we are asking is for a vendor activation? Yep, that would be the word. Thanks, Carlene. I don't speak well. Do you want the form, or is an email enough?
Vendor activations is a form, or if you want to make any changes to the address to the vendor, all of those things are done through the vendor's desk through change requests. Don't believe they activate other than the 444 DOR garnishments without they'll accept that through email only, but they really rely on those forms, if that makes sense. Was that the question? Did that answer the question? Thumbs up? Frowny face? No response? Okay, thank you. Okay,
we do go over that in the vendor training, and I can pop a link to that into our chat.
Yeah. It's a pretty easy, user-friendly form. Let's just put it that way. Okay, common vendor issues that we run across every cycle is if an agency has received information that the vendor name is incorrect. We're going to need a new W-9. It must be requested and received and submitted to the vendor desk. All TIN numbers are validated to assure a match with the name and the IRS TIN. Also happens when they change their TIN number, if there is no vendor name change, but they've just changed their business type, and or they get a new EIN. All of those is always run through the IRS website. If vendor TIN number changed during the year, report on the vendor number that was paid to date of the vendor's ID change with the IRS if any other date than 1/1/2025. So these, any requested updates for the vendor information, a new EIN, or updated W-9 may also change the vendor to an ineligible to report. We've had a number of those. Cross-reference vendor numbers will automatically roll payments to a current and valid vendor number. We have the ability to link vendors, so yay. So if we find out that the type of business type has changed in the previous year, and you're just now catching up and they're putting it in, we can link the two to make sure that any payments that were made will go on to the new vendor through vendor ID. TIN number changed in the previous year, but the agency did not get notified of the update. Oh gosh, how many times have we gotten this one? No updated 1099 for the 2024 will be issued. We just don't do that. It is what it is. But an updated vendor information will only be accepted for 2025 changes. So the current year changes. Payment was made to the incorrect vendor. A correction cannot be processed because it's who you paid. The payment is reportable to a vendor that received and redeemed the payment. A couple of years ago, more than 5, I would say, I received a phone call from an individual who received payment. It wasn't hers. She knew it wasn't hers, but she cashed the check. So she was paid, and she admitted she was paid this money. She received a 1099, but it wasn't for me. It was for another vendor. Yes, but you were paid and you accepted the money. But it wasn't mine. Well, yes, but you were paid and you accepted the money. They received the 1099. It may have needed to be paid to this person, but if it was paid to the person that was reported and they accepted the money and the money is cashed, payment was issued, then it needs to go to the person that we paid. Sorry. Payment was made to the right vendor, but the wrong vendor number. Before January 16th and 26th, process with a 415, 416 transfer. After January, request manual, miscellaneous, or NEC corrections. So that's how those are made. If a vendor appears to have an incorrect coding on the 52, like I've gone through this a couple of times. Verify a corporation or nonprofit is coded as eligible, uh, as long as they're not medical, not a lawyer. We need the paperwork that they are a nonprofit and or paperwork saying they are a corporation and are non-reportable. So they have to return a W-9. That is the key to the kingdom on that one. We need W-9. If we have not received a W-9, they are eligible to receive a 1099, and they're going to be either an 8 or 9 status. No vendor coding change is necessary or will be allowed in this situation. It is what it is. A W-9 has been received per the 52, and coding indicates that 1099 is ineligible. Contact SFMS vendor desk for further information regarding submitted W-9 to confirm that it's correctly coded on the 52. I'm not going to say that mistakes never happen. They rarely happen, but rarely and never are not mutually exclusive. Follow up with 1099 change request form if needed. Attorney is coded incorrectly as non-reportable. It can happen. Please send a change request form to the vendor desk as soon as possible. Follow up with the appropriate 1099 change request form, taking them from $0 to a dollar amount. Remember, it's box 10. If they're representing someone outside of the state, or if they're representing the state, it's going to be NEC. Common vendor issues with contractors. Contractors have travel reimbursements covered by a grant or part of a signed contract. If you're paying the vendor, SFMS takes the position that these types of reimbursements should be reported to an outside vendor as part of the services that they are providing. Vendors should be reported on an NEC form as income to the vendor. And this includes if the state is paying or reimbursing the amount for lodging for an overnight stay. And that's paying to the vendor. If they pay directly to the lodge, then that's where we made the payment. But if you're reimbursing for the overnight stay at whatever lodging to the vendor, then they get the 1099. And that's not box 3, by the way. That's box 1, NEC. Any questions on the common vendor issues that I see every year?
I don't see any questions. We do see a comment that they should have just given the money back.
I agree, and I'm sure Julie somewhere in PUC is laughing her head off because she was across my screen and she was, oh, what if we were paying the vendor as part of an agreement travel time? Well, that's part of services, so it should be a 1099 reportable event. We take that it's part of their services that you're paying those reimbursements. It's maybe in the contract that says they will be reimbursed, but congratulations, that is income to you, and now they can take that off their the expense off as well. They can write it off directly. They can still do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about undeliverable 1099s. Snail mail. 1099s are printed and produced by DAS and sent out into the world by Publishing and Distribution, P&D, to the name and the vendor address is listed on the 52 screen. So that is the parent. So it's very important that the 52 is correct, which is the 51 mail code 000. The week of January 26, 26 is going to be our big push. If a form is returned undeliverable, it happens. SFMS will notify the paying agency regarding the return 1099, and I'll even add why it was returned to the best of my ability. But it needs to be corrected on the 52 as soon as possible. To expedite this, or the whole process is SFMS will inactivate all associated MCs for the vendor until the profile is brought up to date. Agencies should provide the updated address as soon as possible by supplying the vendor change request form. SFMS will then update the 52 profile and activate all the affected MC profiles. SFMS will then email a copy of the return 1099 to the vendor to expedite receipt. We do ask if the email for that vendor be put down at the bottom of the change request form and say for 1099 purposes only, unless the email is not on the 52 profile. It needs or it needs to be updated. So that's kind of how that works. Just so you know, this worked very, very well last year. I don't think I received any complaints about anybody receiving a 1099 copy through email. So the 52 screen, you keep hearing me say 52 screen, 52 screen, 52 screen. It doesn't matter what mail code a vendor is paid on. Mail code 1 through 399. What is important is the correct address is on the mail code 000. That is the parent mail code. That is where it's being sent, and irregardless of what mail code you paid out of. So just be aware of that 52 screen. That's why I keep harping on the 52 screen. That's the all-important screen for 1099 purposes. If a vendor requests a copy of a miscellaneous or NEC, I ask that you don't send me those requests until after February 15th, because I want to give the snail mail a chance to actually deliver the 1099 in question before I send out an email. But please confirm that the vendor actually received a 1099 from the state of Oregon. You can do this through your DAFR 7940, or you can look at the 43M or 43N screen. If the vendor number is not there for 2025, it's going to 43M starts with tax year, so 25, put the vendor number in. If nothing comes up for that vendor, for either form, the vendor did not receive a 1099, so we can't mail anything out that was not produced. If they did receive one, please complete and send a 1099 copy request form as a Word doc. It's available on our website as a Word doc. I'd like to receive it as a Word doc. Repeat that. 2/15/26 is when you can start sending in copy requests. Anyway, I need the vendor number. You're welcome. Vendor number, vendor name, what form they need. Is it an NEC? Is it an MISC? Is it both? You can populate both if they've got both boxes. The year it needs to be sent out. Now, tax year 2023 and to current we will only send them out via email. If it's tax year 22 and 2021, actually only 2020, 2021, I may still be available, may not be available. I can't remember if that's what we archived last night. Verification, then we need verification of address on the 52 screen is correct because we have to mail those out. So that's still through snail mail 22 and earlier. 23 and current are email only. Next year, I think we might be only email. That'll be wonderful. We're getting modern. Anyway, 1099 forms are retained for 4 tax years. So the copy request form is pretty easy to fill out. This is an internal to the State of Oregon form. It's not to be completed by an outside vendor, although they have access to it because it is on the DAS website. So the agency needs to request date, agency number, requested by. Then the required information on the body of the form is, and these are all click and fill in, is vendor number, vendor name, of course, because I can't do anything without it. The year requesting that the vendor you're asking for the copy to be sent. Miscellaneous or NEC form or both. Click, click. The delivery method. And like I said, if it's it's only mail, tax year 22 and earlier, and tax year 23 and later is email only. So if we do need to make a correction on the 52 screen, you can put it here. Great. Or if they want it mailed somewhere else that's not on the 52. I have mailed things to lawyers or to people that are snowbirds, so they might go to Arizona, it might go to their accountant. Here, we just need to know, where do you want me to send it? Same thing with the email address. Where do they want? You need to find out, where do you want us to send this? Do you want us to send this directly to you? Do you want us to send it to your accountant? You get to drive that bus. Anyway, then send that as a Word document. Keep it as a Word document because there's more at the bottom to complete that I complete. If it's sent as a PDF form, I can't finish my process and keep my documentation straight. So it may be rejected and sent back to you and said, hey, I need this in a Word doc. I will only accept it as a Word doc. So just please keep it as a Word doc. It really is easy form to fill out, but I log in the form, I fulfill the request for copy, I communicate with the agency when the request has been sent, so you know when it's been sent, and I save these in the packet for backup purposes. And these will be retained on the same schedule as 1099, which is a 4-year per the IRS schedule. They're not retained for 6 years, only 4 years. And these are only for copy requests that you receive from the vendor. If this is a returned 1099, that email goes on the bottom of a change request because the address needs to be changed. And those are automatic. The vendor desk sends those to me. I complete those. So you don't need to fill these out twice, just only for those that say, hey, I haven't received this. Can you send me a copy? If they contact you directly. So don't think if you're getting 100, they didn't make it to their destination, that this is what you need to fill out. You don't. That's going to be on the change request when you get the updated updated address. Okay, any questions on Return 1099 or copy requests?
We do have one question.
Okay.
Will a new address on that form, on this form, be updated on the 52 screen, or will they need to still file a vendor change request as well?
Yes. If it is for an updated address, this is not the form to do that. This is only if we're redirecting it somewhere.
Awesome. Perfect. So yes, you have to do one of those as well.
I try to stay out of the the changing vendor information as much as possible, unless it's foreign vendors, and that's not 1099 reportable. So,
Fair enough.
uh,
Awesome.
Tammy has a lot of rules.
Oh, all right.
Uh,
Thank you, Carlene.
you're welcome. Okay, volunteer payments. Not a lot of agencies have volunteers, but some of you do. Meals are reportable income to volunteers if they are not accompanied with an overnight stay. Sometimes they have overnight stays, sometimes they don't, but if they've got a meal and you reimburse and it's not associated with an overnight stay, it is now reportable to the volunteer as income. Volunteer drivers are not medical transport. Travel is paid at a reduced rate per the IRS. It's still $14 per mile. It's been that way forever and a day. I don't see them increasing it. If it's paid at the higher rate of mileage, the difference between a volunteer rate and the mileage paid is potentially reportable, but they got to drive a lot of miles to get there. So just so you know, but they still need to meet that $600 minimum. And that's the difference between the two. Volunteers do not provide medical services and should not be reported on a 1099 miscellaneous box 6. They also need to meet the minimum reportable of $600 to be reported to the IRS. Non-reportable travel comp objects for volunteers are listed below. You are encouraged to reclass payments to volunteers or board members to these non-reportable comp objects before December month-end close. So 1099s are not produced if it's appropriate. Prior year corrections. If it's determined by an agency that a corrected 1099 needs to be reported for a prior year, yes, we can do those. But you can send in your change request and I'll hold it I will specify, you need to specify and highlight the tax year that's being corrected. And then prior year corrections will not be processed in the system until after the current year 1099s have been completed, because there are a whole lot of profiles that need to be adjusted to change to a previous tax year. So these won't be processed until after April. So we're looking at May 1st before the first one would even be eligible to be processed. Because we want to be through the reporting process, we want to be through all of it before we move over to a earlier tax year. Just to make sure I'm understanding, if a vendor has returned 1099 due to a, sounds like, I will get to the question slide. I'm sorry, squirrel. EO99 reports. This is a report that is produced in the batch cycle the day after, I think it's President's Day, Martin Luther King holiday. That's the January holiday. It is specific to state employees who have been reimbursed using a reportable comp object. No 1099s will be issued to an OR number. No Social Security number or algorithm payments should be listed on the DAFR EO99. So these are only state employees. If there are reportable payments made to an employee that do not pertain to their job, these payments should be reported on a 1099 NEC under their Social Security number. Like, remember when I talked about this a little bit earlier, talking about if the employee has an outside business and they do something for the state of Oregon as that business, they should be in as a vendor under their business ID if they're paid. And then they are issued a 1099. But if they are doing things with a reportable comp object as an employee, then that is something that needs to be, you need to work with your payroll team to determine if it's a reportable event or not, and it needs to be reported on a corrected W-2 or not. Now, last year, I think we ran into some problems with Workday. Shocker. But they should be able to produce a corrected W-2 if it's appropriate for an employee. Uh, just so you know, most of this is travel related and timeliness of when they get their expense reports in. Reimbursements for employees' expenses. Travels, fringes, awards are not reportable to an employee on a 1099. Reiterate that. So please use this report to review and look for potential reportable income to an employee that should be sent to the payroll team. Processing timeline. We're looking at DAFR 79 and 40 reports will be generated last working day of December 31st this and month-end close January 16th. We have yet to get these two reports. It's important that the report generated on 1/16 is saved by the agency, as previously noted in the training. These reports will be accessible electronically by the agency as a control report. And if you do not receive your reports, contact me or reach out to your SFMS analyst. Now let's talk about the processing timeline. January 16th is the final days for agencies to do any internal online corrections using T code 415416. That night, with the close of the month end, the 43M screen and the 43N screen will be populated with the information. On January 20th, we will run an employee vendors with reportable payments, the EO99 report. It'll be available for viewing the next day. Last day to request manual changes to the 1099 miscellaneous or NEC for that first run are printed will be the 22nd. A reminder, if an agency is requesting 10 or more changes per 1099 type, please notify SFMS, that would be me, as soon as possible so that 1099 change spreadsheet can be sent and used. Then on the 26th, the NEC is electronically filed with the IRS and DOR through the iWire system. You'll note down at the bottom of this of the PDF or the what you received from Amber yesterday has the SFMS 2026 PDF calendars. You can find this on the DAS website, and or the electronic version of the calendar is also available on the DAS website. Shameless plug for my calendar, which I find highly useful. So there you go. February, we have 2 corrective runs for the NEC and adjustments for the MISC. Remember, we don't report that until March. That'll be on the 12th and the 26th. On the 27th, I will send the first corrected 1099 NEC file. And then in March, on the 12th and 26th, we're doing, again, corrected NEC and adjusted miscellaneous. And up to this point, the IRS hasn't been notified of what the income is, so that's why the adjustments for the miscellaneous. And then on the 27th, we're sending the corrected NEC file, and the miscellaneous file will be sent for the first time to the IRS and DOR through the iWire system. April is the last month for any scheduled corrections. That doesn't mean it's so on the 9th and the 23rd, we'll do correction runs if needed for both of those forms. And then the final planned filing for 2025, I missed it, will be done on the 28th of April for the electronic files. This is the end of the scheduled 1099s. That doesn't mean that it's the last time we can do corrections. If you find anything after the fact between uh, uh, April and August, we can send out corrected 1099s through the system that we uh, uh, do it to. I believe after August, fire system is going down forever. Then it's going to be a IRIS system. So just know that we do corrections after the scheduled. It's not you just need to send in the corrected 1099 form. We don't receive a lot, maybe 1 to 2 a year. So just so you know, we do them. Information returns to DAS. This is just our public service announcement. Department of Administrative Services does not, nor do we maintain a system for entities to file a 1099 form with the state of Oregon. Please see the Department of Revenue website for any information regarding 1099 forms that you need to file with the state. They get that information. We do not. Okay, supplemental information on services and rent. There can be a 1099 miscellaneous income as well as NEC income on the same invoice. If your agency has rental equipment or machinery, reportable, as well as services, and they are clearly itemized, the rent goes on box 1 of the miscellaneous, the services go in box 1 of the NEC. If the services and setup of a use of equipment or more are itemized on that invoice. If they're not itemized and you don't know that's separate, you cannot separate them out, it all goes into rent on box 1, 1099 miscellaneous. We do provide a checklist of leading up to the end of tax season for the agencies and a majority of your work, which is please identify which vendors your agency uses, review the IRS regulations or enclosed filing guidelines to become familiar with the type of taxpayer number, identification number is required for each type of entity and how to ask a payee for the correct number if that comes to be a problem. Review reportable vendors if possible for changes in name, address, and entity types. I know you guys deal with a lot, so this may not be possible to do but do look at it just to look for those that, like I said, look kind of, your spidey senses are tingling and saying this isn't right. Review the activity. Review the purchases and confer with other accounting staff to make sure its reportable activity has not been buried in capital outlay or expenditure. Verify any adjustments made manually, such as warrants returned or cancellations or stop pays, are reflected correctly. Just so you know, any cancellations or stop pays on 2025 payments that occur in 2026, and that's starting January 1st of 2026, are not captured in the 1099s. You may need to go back and send me a manual change form for those, and one for 2026 because it may be hitting any returns on that for that vendor in 2026. So it'll lower 2026 and 2025 is overstated. So just so you know, that can occur. Verified adjustments are made manually, such as, verify that BT transactions represented are from payments made in 2025 tax year and not from 24. Original payments made in 24 is a prior year correction will be needed to be reported to the IRS if not previously reported. And original payments made in 24 will need to be removed from any 2025 activity. And hey, you want to know more information? Well, irs.gov is a great place to start, especially forms and pubs. Link to downloaded forms or publications and other educational resources. Just to let you know, I am not a resource for 1099-Gs or Qs. I've not ever filed those. I know nothing about them. So you as an agency will know more about those than I will ever know. So if your agency would like a list of reportable IRSs, please contact me for this information, although we sent it out yesterday. So, but if you want another list, hey. Any final questions for this training? Oh, and I do say one thing. Your comments are very, very important. I know that there will be a questionnaire that goes out after the training. Please be honest. Please let me know if I'm doing a good job, a bad job, how I can improve. That's important to me as a trainer. So any other final questions regarding 1099s though?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and drop that in the chat right now so that they have time to take it. And then I will read them to you. All right, so, I had them all stopped up here. So you have several. Heather says that if volunteers are reimbursed for overnight lodging, is that reportable? And then she followed up with maybe the answer is to change those reimbursements to a different comp object if they cross the $600 threshold. Would you agree?
Go to those comp objects for volunteers. The 5105 to 5905, and those should be the keys to the kingdom on those transactions, whether they are
Perfect.
reportable or not.
Perfect. Okay. And then, whoops. Okay. Is there is there any thought to modernizing these processes so multiple forms don't have to be submitted, which is communicating the same information in time for maybe even next year?
Oh, okay. What question? We keep NECs and MISCs separate. Think of them as two separate forms that copies we've kind of put together just because it's after the fact, but if it's changed to a form or another form, they have to stay separate. As far as vendor, the change request there, that is a process for the vendor desk to change. That's why the vendor change request form. So I'm not sure. No, they cannot be put together. They're separate things. From one comes another, but they are NEC is a different form from MISC, so those changes happen on different screens. They need to stay separate. Sorry.
Perfect. We appreciate the questions.
And remember, you've got box 1 NEC and box 1 rentals. So to put it on the same form, I'm not giving y'all the opportunity to mess me up. I'm already confused.
Okay. Then Samuel says, just to make sure that I'm understanding, if a vendor has a return 1099 due to a bad address, we need to fill out both a vendor change form and also a 1099 copy request form.
No, just the vendor change request form. If you do a vendor change request form and put the email down at the bottom and say 1099 1099 email.
Okay, perfect.
Just that. If you're doing a change request form, it's just the change request form. The copy request form is, I'm a vendor, Sally Fields Foods, and I call up my friend Jenny over at her agency that I can't remember right now. Sorry, Jenny. Uh, and I say I need a copy because I haven't received my 1099, and I'd really like to get this filed because I have a meeting with my accountant to do my taxes. Can you send that to me? That's when you do the copy request. If it's has been returned, then it's going to take the vendor change request form.
Perfect. Okay. All right. And then is the EO99 report one that they have to order?
No, it's an electronic one. I've already ordered it for you. If you have any employees with 1099 reportable comp objects, you can pick that up on I believe it's the 21st. Yeah, the 21st. It'll be available with a date of 120 uh, uh, in the electronic reports for your agency.
Perfect. And then we have a question from Jenny, and she did follow up that she works at OPDC. But she had a question before that. So,
Okay.
do you anticipate that the print plant will mail out the 1099 forms on Monday, January 26th? She just knows that vendors are going to start asking. So,
We run the actual files go over to the print plant in the evening back cycles of the 23rd. They will probably go out the week of the 26th. I don't know when. I don't have access to that because you have to remember they're also producing the W-2s from Workday that have to go out as well. So all I can promise is they will go out before the 30th.
perfect.
So just tell them the week of the 26th. They are being mailed out the week of the 26th. I'll probably get my first phone call, and I won't be here because I'm on vacation on the 6th.
Perfect. All of us should call Carlene on the 6th. Is there a simplified quick reference guide for this training? Is there any other like information for this training anywhere, or just our PowerPoint that we sent out?
Well, as far as this training it's a combination of information found on the IRS website for 1099 miscellaneous information returns, 1099 NEC information returns, and emails I have received from the iWire, as well as Pub 1220. And I am delving now into the IRIS because that's going to be for me next year a whole new experience.
Okay.
And that's a different publication yet, again, that I've been
Perfect.
reading, but not really. I haven't been really absorbing it as well as I should because I've been working with Pub 1220.
Okay. And then another person asks, I may be in the wrong training, yet my question is from someone from paid leave. We got a lot of general questions from claimants last year on what is and what to do with a 1099. What is the general website, and if there's a hotline for them to call to discuss their 1099? We are only trained to direct them to download a 1099 copy from Francis.
Number one, what agency or what group? Is this the Workday group that's sending out 1099s? Or is this because you got to remember that there are agencies out there with sub systems that are not R stars that issue 1099s. Anything outside of R stars is outside of my scope of practice. I don't have access to that information. I cannot research any of that information. I don't see the payments going out. So if it's internal to your, if it's outside of R stars and it's a subsystem and to your, and it's a payment internal to your agency, I can't answer that question. I don't know. And you'll
Okay.
know because my phone number is at the top of every single form that goes out for those payments. Oh, yeah, G's and yeah. Uh, if the payments is outside of R stars, I can't answer those questions. And I
Okay.
1099 Gs, I'm horrible at. I've never really looked it up. But you can probably look up 1099 Gs as far as information and learning on the IRS website. You just have to ask, you just literally put the form number in there, 1099G. Generally speaking, information instructions will come up for that form.
Awesome.
I was asking if you have a quick reference guide that includes. No, not really. I don't think so, other than this training. Is our quote unquote quick reference guide. I don't know if that's something, yeah,
That's a great idea and something that we'll have to
look into,
note.
yeah.
Yeah.
But as right now, it's the IRS website is your best bet.
Awesome. There is one more question kind of sandwiched in the middle from John. It says, in the case of non-reportable 1099 transactions paid to reportable 1099 vendors, are we able to modify the 1099 flags at the time of the SMS vendor payment entry?
I need to read that one.
Okay.
Sorry, I gotta
That's
go
all
into
right.
chat. John.
It's 3 up from the bottom.
From one, two. Is anyone else having issues here? Oh, no, jump to the newest. Okay. John, in case of a non-reportable 1099 transaction paid to a reportable 1099, are we able to modify 1099 flags at the time? No, it's all, The 1099 flag is literally on the comp object. So if you look at, let's see what, excuse me while I fizz back, but way at the beginning where I showed the, sorry if I'm giving anybody a headache for moving all of this stuff. Uh,
The handouts that we sent should have the comp
yeah,
objects too.
literally on the comp object. That's what's driving the boat, John. It's literally at the bottom where it says 1099 indicator, 1099 form. And if there is a form, the indicator is going to be anything other than N. If the indicator is N, then that is a non-reportable comp object. So literally this is driving the boat. You can't put it on a transaction and say, hey, we want to use this comp object, but we want to make it reportable. Fortunately, it doesn't work that way.
He just says, so
So
no
no,
overrides at the time of payment entry. Got it.
correct.
Perfect.
Correct. I believe on the transaction screen, it only asks what box it is. It'll show what box it'll go into, but it doesn't show you what form it goes into because when R-Stars was first brought in, okay, here's the history of it. When R-Stars was first started or initiated for the state of Oregon, there was only one form. It was the 1099 Miscellaneous. Box 7 was NEC. When the IRS in 2016 mandated that Box 7 be reported on January 31st, they then found themselves, IRS, with an inability to assess fees because all the other boxes were still March 31st, but the NEC needed to be January 1st. But if they were making changes between those boxes and things were going every which way, they were having an atrocious time to assess fees. So in, I think it was 2018 or 2019. They brought back a form from the 80s, early 80s, which is the NEC for non-employee compensation. So it was a defunct form that they reactivated that then made us redo the comp objects to include NECs. So on the transactions, you can still see the box number, but you can't see the form. That might be a question for our programmers, but I don't see it getting any traction and being changed because literally we have it on the comp object. It's attached to the comp object, and that's where the programming is. Yeah, so no overwrite, but that's the history of it, just in case you wanted to know. If you have any questions, email me at Carlene Hancock at das.oregon.gov. Call me or contact me through Teams. So thank you for spending your afternoon with me.